But let's talk about a couple key pieces of evidence. In George Bush's first speech to the nation on Iraq and Hussein, Cincinnati, Ohio, October 7, 2002, he told the nation that Hussein was a great danger to America, either by his attacking us with his weapons of mass destruction or giving those weapons to some terrorist group to attack us. And he said this attack could happen, quote, on any given day, meaning the threat was imminent. Unfortunately for George Bush, and I don't know how he could get around this at his trial, on October the 1st, 6 days earlier, the CIA sent George Bush its 2002 National Intelligence Estimate, a report from 16 U.S. intelligence agencies. This report representing the consensus opinion of all 16 U.S. intelligence agencies on the issue of whether Hussein was an imminent threat to the security of this country. And on page 8 of this 91-page report, page 8, 91-page report clearly and unequivocally says that Hussein was not an imminent threat to the security of this country, that he would only be a threat if he feared that America was about to attack him. In other words, he would only be a threat if he was forced to fight in self-defense. So we know, not think, but we know that when George Bush told the nation on the evening of October the 7th, 2002, Cincinnati, Ohio, that Hussein was an imminent threat to the security of this country, he was telling millions of unsuspecting Americans the exact opposite of what his own CIA was telling him. So if we had nothing else at all, this alone shows us that he took this nation to war on a lie, and therefore all of the killings in Iraq of American soldiers became unlawful killings and therefore murder. But it gets worse. October 4th, 3 days after the October 1st classified top-secret report, Bush and his people had the CIA issue an unclassified summary version of the October 1st classified report, so that this report could be issued to the American people and to Congress. And this report came to be known as the White Paper. And in this White Paper, the conclusion of U.S. intelligence that Hussein was not an imminent threat to the security of this country was completely deleted from the White Paper. Every single one of these all-important words were taken out. I'll touch upon another piece of evidence. January 31st, 2003, George Bush and Prime Minister Tony Blair met in the Oval Office with 6 of their top aides, including Condoleezza Rice, the National Security Advisor for Bush, and Blair's Chief Foreign Policy Advisor, David Manning. Now, 2 months later, they go to war because, they say, Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and they had to go in there and disarm Hussein and these weapons of mass destruction. After the meeting, Manning prepares a 5-page memo stamped extremely sensitive in which he summarizes what was said at the meeting. And Manning writes that Bush and Blair expressed their doubts that any weapons of mass destruction would ever be found in Iraq, although 2 months later they went there because they said they had the weapons and we had to disarm them. But it gets much, much, much worse. Manning wrote that Bush was so worried, so upset over the failure of the UN inspectors to find weapons of mass destruction that he talked about 3 ways to, quote, provoke a confrontation with Hussein, one of which, Bush said, was to, quote, fly U-2 aircraft, reconnaissance aircraft, over Iraq, falsely painted in United Nations colors, and Bush said, if Hussein fires upon them, this will be a breach of UN resolutions and justify war. So here we have George Bush telling the American people, telling the world, that Hussein was an imminent threat to the security of this country. So we had to strike first in self-defense. But behind closed doors, this very small man was talking about how to provoke Hussein into a war.
We've gone through all senior people in the administration, the papers preparing for such a meeting. And it means that at senior levels in the US administration, crazy, illegal, deceitful proposals like that were actually being contemplated to trigger a war by deceit.
The evidence is very clear that while young American soldiers who never even had a chance to live out their dreams were being blown to pieces by roadside bombs in Iraq, George Bush was having fun and living life, enjoying life to the very fullest. I'm talking about running, bicycling, joking with friends, slapping backs, dancing and swiveling his hips like Elvis to blaring music, eating his hot dogs and blueberry pies. For this, George Bush himself has had no hesitancy in saying things like this. And as I quote George Bush, I want you to think of two things. Number one, the incredible horror and savagery and mutilation of bodies and beheadings and the sea of blood and the screams going on at the time he's making this remark. And try to think, if you can, of Presidents Roosevelt, Truman, LBJ, Nixon, during their respective wars saying things like this. Here's George Bush, right in the middle of all this horror. Laura and I are having the time of our lives. It's going to be a perfect day. I'm in a great mood. As recently as December 2007, I'm feeling pretty good about life.
Weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. We must stop the terror. I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.